Hello and welcome to Deep Impact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Arbo's most inhuman work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
That it was. And we are back to talk about Execution 13.3. So Blake runs away from his agreed attack on the Duchamps. That he agreed with Molly, that Molly agreed to do for him, that he convinced Molly to do. He just abandons that plan, and instead he's just going to do something else that we don't really understand, but it seems to involve finding mags.
Remember that thing I said last episode about how Molly will understand because she's omniscient?
Yeah.
I take it back. She might understand, but she's not going to accept what's going on.
Yeah, I think he would need to have, like, an actual thought process. His thought process was just, oh, that doesn't look possible. Let's not bother. Let's go do something else.
And he jumps immediately to, better go find Mags, the one person Molly would not really want me talking to.
Yeah. There's this hilarious quote where Blake kind of reflects on how he's out of the abyss now and it's better because this world isn't actively conspiring against him, and then he rethinks that almost immediately because of his karma, which is a great little beat.
Well, it's not even I don't think he has the karma anymore. It's that he's like actively fighting the universe. It's kind of like,
true.
Is the universe going to actively conspire against me? It's like, well, I am kind of trying to take it on 1v1.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like this. I mean, I think the interesting bit is kind of, he brings up again how the abyss seems to have this sort of intelligence to it.
Yeah.
And, we haven't seen that out of the actual universe. I just wonder if that's a thing, like whether the intelligence of the abyss is going to become a thing, because it seems fascinating that the underpinnings of the universe have some sort of intelligence to them, but the main part doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm calling it the main part. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. Maybe there's another level above this where everyone's really happy and they're looking down at, like, our plane of existence, and they're like, God, that place is miserable.
I mean, I hope so.
But yeah, I don't know. This is like the first in what are a number of really, really funny bits this chapter. This is a really funny chapter.
What happened this chapter? Just like, it has a ton of Blake sarcastic jokes that are really good.
Yeah, just sarcastic thoughts and things he says. Yeah, I don't know. There's just a number of bits in this chapter that made me laugh out loud.
Yeah, it's a good one. So Blake basically sends Evan to look for signs that would lead them to the Junior Council, which is what they're looking for. Evan flies off to scout around, and Blake and Evan have some alone time.
Sorry, Blake and Green Eyes.
Sorry, Blake and Green Eyes, you're right.
So I'm just going to straight up steal a line from one of our patrons, Isha Moradin, who said in our live read that, this only works because Green Eyes loves herself a Twiggy back ride, which I just love that line. I'm just going to repeat it so everyone can hear it.
Yeah, that's 10 out of 10. Speaking of this Twiggy back ride, like, Green Eyes and Blake have this long conversation over, the next few paragraphs. In fact, longer than that, because it continues even while they get into a bit of a scrap. And we've been talking about how Green Eyes is wholesome but has a lot of red flags. I don't know, like, this chapter to me is very reassuring about Green Eyes. Like, she talks about her relationship with Blake and how she likes him and would potentially be interested in a relationship with him, but in a way that is very, very respectful of his boundaries. She's very cool. She's very chill about it.
Yeah, she basically just sort of comes onto him in the sort of most, or the least aggressive way possible. Just, hey, whatever you're down for, I'm down for it too. Just let me know, which is a fairly reasonable way to go about it. I think.
Not even that. She kind of seems to have picked up that Blake doesn't, that Blake has some issues with some of this stuff and waited for him to bring up the conversation. She mentioned their relationship, but only in the context of them having a friendship. And it was Blake that kind of took it to the, well, actually, let's talk about this kind of level.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, good work, Green Eyes. Good work. I don't know, like, she's just so non-monstrous.
Yeah, it's funny, I think, because you're right, we have sort of talked about, is she a good influence or a bad influence and all that. And I think I mean, here she sort of shows her good side. I think maybe, it's probably a bit simplistic to say, oh, the story wants us to see her as a bad thing or a good thing. She's just another complicated thing, another complicated boogeyman.
Yeah.
And especially as Blake starts to wrangle with that, with his own nature, this arc a lot more than he has in the past. I think we're getting more and more of the both sides to everything, including Green Eyes.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing about this conversation I really like is she kind of starts it up by saying to Blake, like, I wish I had something like your motorcycle. I wish I had something that I was striving for, but I don't. And that's her goal. She wants something. She wants to want something, I think it's a little clingy for now Blake is that Blake is the thing that she kind of wants. It's defined, her wants are defined by wanting to be a good friend to you, Blake, which is a little clingy, but I have faith that she's going to find more stuff that she will care about as she continues living her life, and maybe after things quieten down and she doesn't just go around murdering Duchamps all day,
Oh yeah, this book gives me lots of vibes of things will calm down soon. Yeah, I mean, I think like she sort of gives this whole speech on how she was so disconnected from the world that she basically fell into the abyss, and that's like her whole thing is she's like, I just want something to want because I didn't want anything, and that's how I ended up in the abyss. And it's just sort of another reminder about how important connections are in this world. Like she didn't have any, and she slipped through the cracks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of get it being in that sort of stagnant position where you don't want anything and you just kind of flat and you slip through. I think it's I don't know. It was a sort of heavy thing to start to consider, like Green Eyes' origin story. And then of course in this world, that the way you get out of that sort of stagnant position is the abyss comes in to help change you, and it sure does a bang up job.
Well, it definitely changes you. That's for sure. Not necessarily for the better, I think is the problem.
Yes.
So Evan kind of loops back around and lets them know that he hasn't found anything yet, but he has seen that there are some goblins around here that are probably coming in this direction, so keep an eye out. And then Evan flies off again. And sure enough, Blake and Green Eyes get attacked by these goblins and use this opportunity to discuss their potential relationship.
Yeah, the goblins are just kind of an inconvenience towards this conversation that they continue anyway. Or at least Green Eyes really does. Blake kind of spends half of it being like, are you still really talking about this? There's a few bits I want to pull out from here because there's a lot of interesting stuff in this conversation. I think the first one is, we're really starting to see Blake reconcile that some bits of him are real and some aren't. I think ever since Arc 9, he's just sort of been, I'm not real. And even after the revelation in Arc 12, he sort of hadn't quite clicked until, I think, his conversation with Rose.
Yeah.
Where he's seen himself like, oh, wait, there are bits of me that are real. And I think maybe the pivotal point of that was when he realized that Ross was a guy.
Yeah.
And it sort of validated his existence to himself a bit more, I guess.
I definitely think that is the case, because this chapter, the way he reacts to being touched by Green Eyes, seems to be more of a, not a regression, that's kind of too negatively tinted, but seems to be more in line with how he was before he found out he was fake, rather than, for example, an arc or 2 arcs ago, he seemed to more or less have put it behind him, but the fact that it possibly happened to Ross has seemed to make it more real to Blake again.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to directly upset him, but he sort of takes that bit where he's like, oh, this should be upsetting me, which is a bit more than we've gotten.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I think we've been talking about for ages now this whole you've got to start to actually do this fight between your boogeyman nature and your human nature, and we've just seen it go more and more boogeyman. And it's like ever since this conversation with Rose, where his existence got a little bit more validated, now we're finally seeing it. Like I think the last 2 chapters, it's sort of been Blake actually having that war and confronting the fact that there's now boogeyman parts to him and his original self in there, and he's finally starting to sort of progress back up the other way a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think another piece of evidence this chapter that shows that he is starting to maybe go in that direction is he gets cut by a goblin and bleeds. And
Yeah,
he
yeah,
and we are surprised by this. This is very much a bit of a human thing, right? Like, of course, there's also a moment where he gets stabbed through the throat and it heals up in a matter of seconds. But, you take the pros and cons where you can find them, I guess.
yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, I don't think it would be Blake to ever go back to just being a full human. Like, I think
Yes.
what we've been arguing for the last few arcs is some balance, like picking bits of each and whatnot, and that sort of seems to finally be what he's doing. He's starting to not just be overwhelmed and sort of succumb to the pressure of becoming a boogeyman.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to keep following this, presumably throughout this whole arc.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, yeah, maybe. He does kind of seem to go around killing more Duchamp husbands at the end of the chapter, though, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I have some question. Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about that, and I'm not sure what to do with them yet.
Okay.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about here is like, as we get more info on Green Eyes, I just keep noticing more and more similarities between Green Eyes and Tiff. Like, I don't know if I'm just making stuff up, but particularly since the whole like in 12.8 when she reacted really negatively to the smell of alcohol on that one lady.
Yeah.
And there was sort of this implication that her past may have involved, alcohol, presumably like alcoholic parents or something.
Yeah. I actually had this exact same thought when I was writing up the bit in the notes that we just talked about Green Eyes being seemingly very respectful of Blake's boundaries and issues around, touching and physical intimacy, which reminded me a lot of, their conversations at the coffee shop and this stuff where it was them kind of trying to navigate a potentially minefield of a relationship. I don't know what it means though, right? Like, what's the meaning to be extrapolated from this?
No, exactly. Well, I feel like we had that whole bit in I think it was 12.6 or so with Tiffany arguing with Ellie, and it kind of felt like we started to bring up this thread of Tiff's past and then sort of dropped it. And I still think maybe we'll come back to that. And if we do, maybe that's when it'll start to click with Green Eyes, perhaps. I don't know. I just think there's some similarities between these two characters that I think the story might start to compare them a bit. Maybe something to do with taking agency in how you sort of live your life. I don't know.
Or maybe Tiffany, like something goes horribly wrong for her and then she gets sent back in time and becomes Green Eyes. They're actually one character.
Sure. If this was Doctor Who, I'd give it good odds.
Tiffany fights Jeremy. That's where the bad experience with alcohol comes from. Then somehow gets sent back in time, becomes a mermaid, and now we're here.
Yeah, Alistair sends her back in time. It's all coming together.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
So let's move on, shall we? I also want to pull out why it's... I guess the question is, so now Blake and Green Eyes fight these goblins, and it's a fight that they win fairly handedly, but I think it's interesting to analyze why Wildbow chose to put a goblin fight here, right? What's the purpose of this? And so I was thinking about this, and I think, again, this is we're kind of reopening this wound of human Blake versus Boogie Blake. And I think this fight with these goblins is a chance to kind of justify Blake's murder of the Duchamp husbands, which is basically what he's been doing for the past few chapters, right? Because this is his inhuman side, going around and hunting the, in air quote, monsters, which really just means the Duchamp husbands now. Goblins are kind of this symbol of being, like, comically villainous. And so the fact that, there's a Duchamp husband who is a goblin king is kind of, in some way, justifying Blake killing more Duchamp husbands. Like, every Duchamp husband we've seen has been a piece of shit practitioner, right? Like, the necromancers, the ogre shamans, like, they're all bad. They're all seemingly really do the, like, dark side of the practice.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seemed to run into any of the nice Duchamp husbands yet.
Yeah.
There are a few chill ones way back in Arc 3 that we met.
Wait, who?
Or they just or they Bahame? No, they were Bahame family members.
Yeah, they were.
weren't
We've
Never
never
mind.
seen a chill Duchamp husband. They,
Um,
actually, I want to talk about this. Spoiler alert. We've put out a comment. We've done some comment dives for our bonus bit this chapter, and I put out a comment about this, and I really want to touch on it later. So I think put a
Okay.
pin in this one, and we'll get to some comments later that deal with it.
Okay, I do just want to quickly say that we find out one of them's called or one of them's a Goblin King, and it's just kind of like as if the premise for this family wasn't already terrible enough. Now we find out all their husbands are extra shitbags. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
right. Like
uh
we haven't seen a good Duchamp husband except Jeremy, and we'll get to that later.
yeah. I mean, he's the standout, which is I mean, it wasn't what I would have expected when we hit Sandra's interlude.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's interesting. We sort of get reprimed in this whole fight with the goblins for how shit the Duchamp husbands are, and actually, let's wait till we get to where he meets Joyce and her sister again, because I think there's some interesting stuff to talk about there.
Yeah, sure. So these goblins, catch up to Blake and Green Eyes, and there's a fight. The goblins basically get completely trounced. Blake and Green Eyes actually make a really, really solid pair. So again, more evidence that they would be a great couple. Yeah, no, it reminds me of we've pulled out a few times when Blake has actually just worked really well with people. He did it with Mags and Rose for a bit. Obviously, he always seems to work really well with Evan. And it seems that Green Eyes, again, fits that bill. They just seem to get each other and work well as a murder duo.
Yeah. I mean, I was very impressed by both of them. Blake fits in some snark in various bits of this fight as well. Yeah, I don't know. This is just a really action-heavy bit, but it's really good action. Blake and Green Eyes absolutely kick ass.
Yeah, again, Blake does some good snark. I kind of start thinking that the confrontation with Rose has somehow made him less, he doesn't give a shit as much. He's more apathetic, and maybe that leads to him just making some snarkier comments. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, so again, something that happened on our Discord recently was Kipos, one of our patrons, went on a big spiel about 1.1, and it was really great. It had been too long since I sort of looked at that chapter, and Kipos pulled out a bunch of stuff.
It was such a great thread.
Yeah, and now we know so much more about Ross/Blake. It was really interesting to sort of re-examine it. And one thing I really picked out was Ross/Blake back then. It was pretty snarky, arguably some of the best lines in the story so far were in 1.1. I still remember the bit where Granny Rose sort of comes out after meeting all the heirs, and she's like, "I'm very disappointed," and Ross sort of goes, "Don't worry, the feeling's mutual."
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. This might be a sign that Blake is getting some of the humanity back, because it feels like it's a very old school Ross move to have this sort of snark.
Yeah. One thing that I really liked about this thread that Kipos wrote was the discussion about something I hadn't noticed, which was that Ross was very patient in his conversation with Granny Rose. He was not quick to anger. He was kind of doing some verbal takedowns, but he wasn't being.
It was very deliberate. Yeah,
exactly. Which reminded me that this is just not the Blake we know at all. And so I'm kind of surprised it didn't jump out a little more as hey, this seemed a little out of character. Now we obviously understand why. And so I think the thing to pay attention to in terms of the humanity is the patience. If we see Blake slowing down, being more patient, being less aggressive, that's the key sign to me that he is regaining some humanity here.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the most human we've ever seen him was the first 7 arcs of the book, and he wasn't a very patient person.
It's true.
Back then.
I feel like he was more patient, at least.
Yeah, sure. Although I'm willing to attribute that. I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I just don't think it may not be quite as simple as getting back to what he was. I think that's maybe the really interesting thing here is.
Yeah, sure.
He sort of gets to redefine himself a bit from scratch in a way, and that could be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so they fight these goblins, they beat these goblins, and Blake basically says to them, "Hey, either surrender yourself and agree to not ever hurt anyone again, or become a weapon." And they both decide to become weapons, wanting to hurt more people. Blake's like, "All right, two more tools for my arsenal."
Yeah. This is starting to become a pattern. I guess if you're going to be like a serial killer collecting trophies, goblins
Yeah,
aren't the worst demographic to
yeah,
target. But it's just interesting. Like, it jumped out to me as so different from 12.8, where he sort of gave Joyce a chance and then just murdered everyone while sort of talking to them. Whereas with the goblins, he had this third option of turning them into weapons that he didn't really have with the humans, so he just had to kill them.
And he didn't even I think it's fair to say he didn't even give those Duchamps as much of a chance as he has given these goblins. Like, isn't that wild? Like he's taken this mission of kill the monsters, and now that only seems to apply to practitioners. He doesn't. He's more reluctant to kill others at this point than he is to kill practitioners.
Yeah. I mean, because you could make the argument that it's like, oh, well, it's just in goblins' nature. They don't know better, whereas humans have a choice. But that almost makes me more upset because it means he's completely given up on any sort of rehabilitory methods. I don't know. I think he sort of, remember, he did have that whole speech with some of them. I think it was the two brothers where he was like, tell me that I could consider you good people and I won't kill you.
Yeah, true.
So, I mean, it wasn't a completely ruthless thing, but then also that was a harsher sort of thing than the goblins got. I agree. Although the goblins have this option of turning into weapons. I don't know if humans get that choice.
I'm sure they can figure out a way. Yeah, so I think another thing to note is Blake gets stabbed in the throat and it heals very quickly. He can't talk for a little bit, but it seems to heal within minutes.
And it's covered, what he got stabbed in is covered in like blood and shit, and it's gross.
Oh yeah, definitely gross.
Like, that just makes it more crazy that it heals so fast, because
Yes.
that shit should be infected.
Yeah, there's no infection or anything, which you would think goblins basically aim to deliver infections whenever they can.
Yeah, I think that was what happened to Mags in Signature.
Yes. So, I don't know, it just kind of, it stood out to me because this is quicker than we've seen him heal from things before. We saw him heal from a few things in the in Duress when the house was being attacked, but even that, he seemed to have to kind of negotiate with the Abyss or with his spirits to get that to happen. So it seems to me that because this healed so quickly, the Abyss must be pretty happy with him. I mean, that's maybe a bit of a jump to assume that's the reason, but it seems to make sense, which basically means he's the cleaver guy from last chapter.
I think like he sort of starts to get his speech back when the goblins start to get scared. Like, I think it's just fueled by the fear he instills in them, maybe.
Sure.
So it's that sort of, it's this weird catch-22 he's got, where the more he scares people, the more invulnerable he is, and the scarier he is. So he just needs to sort of start off being scary, and it's this positive feedback loop he might be able to get into.
Once he scares the first person, it just rolls out of control from there.
Yeah,
that's a fair read. Maybe it is more to do with the fear, although I don't think those two are completely disconnected. Presumably, scaring people is serving the Abyss as well.
Well, yeah, you're right. I probably just thought of a different way of expressing the same idea, because that does seem to be what the Abyss wants him to do.
Yes. So Blake and Green Eyes basically see Evan being chased by a gargoyle and kill it, or Green Eyes kills it. And Evan shows them that he has found basically a protected area that he thinks the Junior Council is in. It's a hidden street, like that hidden bookshelf in the Hillsglade House library that definitely is still okay and hasn't burned to the ground.
Yeah, what's going on up there? There's too many major problems in this town. I always love seeing this space warp stuff. Like, that did my head in God, it was like 1.2.
Yeah, it would have been real early.
And I love the idea in this, like, when Evan just flies straight at it and he comes back the same way. Like, he doesn't turn around, he just keeps flying forward and ends up doing a 180. It feels like like when you hit like weird boundaries in video games and the game just turns you around or something. It's so fun.
Yeah. It's hilarious. And so, okay, before we get to that though, there's this bit where Green Eyes talks about how she would love a chicken nugget, kind of making a joke at Evan's expense. But Evan doesn't get it. And it's this classic Evan move of when he doesn't get a joke, he will just continue to pester people until they let him in on the joke. And this has happened so many times with every person that's joined Blake's like team. It's like it's an initiation ritual at this point. And Green Eyes gets her turn. So now she's officially a member of Blake's cabal, I think.
Good for her? Question mark.
Yeah, it doesn't turn out so well for most people. So,
yeah, I don't know. It's another really funny bit in this chapter, as we sort of already touched on.
Yeah. So Blake realizes that he is immune from this spell, from this misdirection spell, and basically goes in without Evan and Green Eyes because they can't come in. Which is good work, Blake.
Yeah, it's vintage Blake. Just hey guys, I'm going in, and then they're like, when will you be back? And he's like, do you have a watch? No, and it's like, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, why'd you ask such a stupid question, Evan? Fuck. No, it is a Blake move, but then again, he couldn't take them with him, so maybe we're being a bit too hard on him.
He could have taken the extra 5 seconds he would have needed to explain it better.
No, there's no time. No, you're right. He could have. I actually also like, as Blake starts to realize what's going on, he says, they're being redirected, I said. It's almost impressive. And my headcanon on this is that Blake was going to say that it was impressive, but then realized he actually wasn't impressed and he didn't want to lie, so he had to pivot at the last second. Which I think, honestly, this is impressive, Blake. You're allowed to... It's impressive. I'd call it impressive.
He has one of these at home. That's not that impressive.
He's seen better ones with the Bahame time bubble. Anyway, so Blake heads inside and finds Joyce's sister, who basically reveals that Joyce has been just like sitting on the floor doing nothing, which is hilarious. Absolutely love that. Anyway, so he kind of starts to negotiate with his Duchamps and basically is like, yeah, I killed your husband. Yeah, I killed your uncle. I'm going to kill some more husbands. And they're all like, okay, come on in. We like you.
Yeah. You're right. That bit where we find out Joyce has just kind of been sitting there staring at the ground, not moving, is kind of equal parts hilarious and just kind of horrifying. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, it's better than killing her, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the really interesting thing about this whole section to me is Blake simultaneously kind of gets rewarded for sparing Joyce. Like, this whole bit goes a lot better. But then he also gets rewarded for having killed all these other husbands, because pretty much, I love I love Joyce's sister's reaction where she's like, "You killed my husband." That wasn't Joyce's call to make, but then she pretty much immediately from there is like less tense. Like she the vibe I got is very much that she thinks that this is a net positive result.
What a thing to say to the person who killed your husband. Oh, my sister shouldn't have told you to do that. Oh.
That wasn't her call.
Yeah.
I needed to make that call.
What a like a weird, like, it's so immediately obvious that she doesn't give a shit that her husband is dead at all.
Yeah, she's just annoyed that she wasn't consulted.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I really like
good.
how, as we're sort of seeing Blake wrestle with these two sides of himself, here we get this example of where it's kind of working for him both ways. Like he's getting rewarded for the gruesome murders that he did. He's also kind of getting rewarded for having spared Joyce. So he's kind of getting rewarded for picking the right monsters or something. I don't know. It's just really interesting to see him kind of, as he's struggling with these two sides to himself, see that they both have their pros and cons. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that's, again, one of the themes of this chapter is he's kind of in between again. And he's facing... It seems that the decision he made to dive fully into his otherness was not as permanent as we thought.
Thank God.
So he's again being offered a few paths. Turns out Lola Duchamp is here, and so are the rest of the junior council. They're all Skyping like a bunch of junior council members, like the cool young kids that they are.
These newfangled councils and their teleconferencing.
Yeah. And Blake basically asks, hey, can I join the meeting? And also, can I get a phone to dial in some more Thorburns?
Just what every council needs.
Yeah.
Again, he gets nothing out of Lola until he mentions that he killed her uncles, and then she's kind of like, "Okay, I'm listening." And he basically threatens to kill her fiance as well.
Yeah,
and she's like,
not threatens, offers. I think.
Well, yes, actually, you're right. You're right. That's a much better word for it.
Like, yeah.
I don't know. You get the impression from the way that this segment ends that it's like, is Blake kind of setting himself up to be the Andy and Eva of the Junior Council? Like, I almost get the impression he's basically going to join the meeting and be like, righto, what's the hit list look like? I'm on it.
Well,
I don't know. I'm very interested to see what his plan is.
It's interesting. I don't know, because, like, the framing for this is, at the end of last chapter, he looked at Sandra and Jeremy and said, okay, I can't attack them directly, there has to be another way. And so that implies to me, this is his plan to deal with the Duchamps. And so there's kind of two reads on that. Either it's, he thinks dealing with the Duchamp husbands is enough to depower them so that, you know, it's a way to deal with them while also keeping them sort of on side. Or the other read is that he's being a lot more sly than we're giving him credit for right now, and this is a way of either turning the Duchamps against each other or doing some other high-level plays that removes all the Duchamps. Because regardless of how many Duchamp husbands he kills, like, that's not going to depower Sandra and Jeremy. They're still going to be out there doing their shit, you know?
Oh, yeah, but a huge part of their strength is the assets that they have on hand.
No,
I agree. I think he's setting up some sort of perhaps Duchamp civil war. Like, I think what's interesting is if he starts targeting the husbands and some of the husbands get wind that some of the Duchamps may be a part of it, that could devolve very quickly.
Yes,
so that might be the plan. That's sort of the best case scenario. I'm still not sure exactly what his hope is with connecting the Thorburns to the Junior Council. It's gonna be fun. I can't wait to see.
What kind of a plan is that, anyway?
I don't know what he's thinking, but I'm here for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I'm getting the impression that we might be heading towards weakening the Duchamps, because if you can sow discord amongst the family, I mean, you know, it's a family built on eggshells because, you know, they've all been married off to people they hate. Well, not all of them, but seemingly most.
When you force your daughters to marry literally the worst of the worst, like, I don't know, what do you expect?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think this could be really fun. And then again, like, I think this will be great because Sandra and Jeremy have been built up as such a strong relationship. I don't think they will ever crack, even if, like, sort of the rest of the husbands start to turn on the family.
Yeah.
And so they'll kind of be the final boss in a way, because they'll lose, maybe even if they lose all the rest of their resources, I think those two will still be together and they'll still be strong, and that'll be really interesting.
I basically can't see a situation where Jeremy joins the Duchamp husbands in their revolution or whatever it ends up being, right?
No, me either.
Yeah. Anyway, there were some really, really great comments in the comment chain, I guess, under this chapter. And so we wanted to dive into some of these comments to prompt some talking points that we had stuff to say on. And I'm going to talk about mine first because I thought it was really interesting. It was basically a thread with a few people in it, like Sir Fuente, Nick012000, a guy called Guy. The thread was basically talking about Duchamp husbands, how the Duchamps view their husbands, and whether the Duchamp husbands are actually monsters, in air quotes. And obviously the answer to that kind of is, it depends, but there was this really interesting comment made by Nick012000 who said that, like, who kind of reminded us that back in Sandra's interlude, Jeremy, at the height of his, you know, potential and power, was mentioned as being one of the worst candidates that they've ever had, like one of the most uncouth candidates. Not even for his level of power, but just because he was, like, theoretically uncouth. And now we've seen other Duchamp husbands. Like, that's insane to me. Jeremy is clearly the best of all of them. They're all such pieces of shit. Like, this is crazy.
Do you think that may have been a bit of a tipping point? Like, because Jeremy, I think, clearly worked out.
Yes.
Like, Sandra came very close to becoming the wife of the Lord of Toronto. Do you think maybe the family pivoted direction a bit after Jeremy worked out, and it's like, oh, it actually turns out that, you know, some of these people might seem gross or whatever, but Sandra seems relatively happy, and she got really close to a lot of power. Maybe we've got to expand out to less nice people. and now there's just a bunch of them stuck with necromancers and goblin kings. It's like, how the fuck did we get here?
Yeah, I suspect possibly not so intentionally, but I can't imagine there wouldn't be a Duchamp conversation where a young Duchamp lady says, "Oh, but I'm worried about him. He's a goblin king. Like, he seems like a bit of a shitbag." And they say, "Oh, Sandra, tell us about how well your marriage has worked out." And she's like, "Yeah, it's great. We love each other, sort of." Even though I thought he was uncouth, and so it kind of like reinforces a bit just because it worked out this one time.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good point. I mean, it may have just been like I think there probably are Duchamps who get pretty great husbands. They're just not the ones that Blake is having to interact with because they're presumably somewhat happy.
Yeah, they're off like living a happy life in Ontario or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, I love that. I love that idea. Just like reflecting on, yeah, the Duchamps must really have their priorities warped if they think Jeremy is one of the worst cases.
Yeah. I mean, he's the best we've seen so far. And so I've pulled out a comment, and there was some responses, but it was really started by Bart.
Mm-hmm. Eat my shorts, am I right?
Yes, the one and only. And Bart started talking about how, well, they were speculating on what Green Eyes' Blackfish might have been, or what it was wanting her to confront, which I thought was really interesting, especially since it's the only black thing that has taken the form of a fish that we've seen, and yet we call them all blackfishes.
I mean, we haven't even seen it. We just heard Green Eyes talk about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It could be a dolphin. She could be completely wrong. But yeah, I mean, so Bart kind of went on this whole, came up with this whole sort of story about how Green Eyes might have gotten drunk, and been responsible for a kid, like she was babysitting or something. She got drunk and the kid died, and that was sort of what led her to be ostracized from her community, or something. And I think it's a really interesting idea. I don't know if that's quite like I don't know if I believe that is probably exactly it, which some of the other commenters felt the same. But like in general, I think the idea is a really good one. Like, she obviously has some truth in her past that she hasn't confronted, given the whole blackfish thing. And obviously, we know she doesn't like alcohol, so that's presumably some sort of factor. But yeah, I don't know. I just really liked sitting here and pondering what it might be. I think we'll never find out because Blake cheated. And got her out without her having to confront it, so now she'll never know.
Did the cheat code for her. Yeah. It's interesting. I like the elements that come together in Bart's speculation, but it doesn't feel like it's... Like, it feels like it's still very much a speculation because we haven't really had any info besides the fact that alcohol may have been involved in either her mistakes or in her upbringing.
Yeah,
I want to find out more, I want more.
Yeah, I agree. I feel about that in so many parts of this story though. So,
Yeah, I think, and I mean, I'll say it again. The world in Pact it's just so good. Like, this is why I'm comfortable saying that it's my favorite of Wildbow's stories, is because I know the breakneck pace can be a bit much for people and there's all this stuff, but fuck man, the world of Pact is just so on point.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is the one I've grown the most attached to, and you could argue there's reasons for that, like the way we're covering the story, and as we discussed when we first started the podcast, my bias towards this sort of story. But this world is so fantastic, and the story in it is fantastic as well. But the world building here is just so like I could read 100 more stories like this in this world. I think
I could do 100 more monster corners. Of just like hey, how does this thing tie in? What's the law of this, and why is it like this in Pact? Like, anyway, that's the end of our show on this great book that we call Pact. If you want to leave a comment on this episode, or hey, leave an answer to our discussion question, which is talking about, does Rose actually have the heart and soul in this partnership? A lot of people have interpreted that question differently and left very different answers, which I quite like. So feel free to do that by leaving your answer in our discussion thread, which you can see in the comments in our show notes down below.
Yep, and if you want to keep up on what's happening with the show, if an episode's coming out late or what have you, or if you're interested in some live reads, head on over to Twitter, at Media and D Podcast is where you can find us.
Yep. And if you want to find out more about all the great shows on the Doof Media Network, you can head to doofmedia.com, where you can see all the other great shows, including the Doofcast, which is about to release an episode on She-Ra, the new She-Ra series.
Yeah. I actually started that show for this episode.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm actually really liking it.
I've been meaning to catch up on a few of these shows that are kind of like wholesome. What's the way of describing these shows, right? Like wholesome young adult shows, like your She-Ra, your Steven Universe, a bunch of these shows that I feel like I've just kind of missed out on.
No, I'm the same, and I've started with She-Ra, and I'm really digging it so far. I'm keen to hear Matt and Scott talk about it.
Awesome. Another great show on the Doof Media Network is What You Say, which has just got a new episode out about The Secret. Would you like to know what The Secret is, Elliot?
Bad writing.
No, and I can't tell you. It's a secret. You have to listen to the episode to find out.
Oh boy. And if you want to support all these great shows on the Doof Media Network, patreon.com/Doof Media. That's the place to go.
Yeah, being on our Patreon gets you access to all kinds of cool things like the Doof Discord, the Doof Minecraft channel, the monthly Doof and Chill streams. The next one is happening in about a week, so check that out. All kinds of cool stuff. Also, if you're looking for perks, there's no perkier place to go than Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/Wildbow. Because, of course, the perk that you get from supporting Wildbow is knowing that you contributed to the great worlds of all these great stories. So check that out if you have the time.
Yes, and so apart from that, we'll see everyone on Monday, the 11th of the 11th, to discuss Execution 13.4.
Make a wish.
Not this again.